Okay, so I'm here with Gaelynn Lea. It's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I did some research before I came to see you, and I'm inspired. You are amazing.
Yeah.
To me, you know, it's just so cool to meet somebody who has such an influence on so many people. I hope you don't mind, I actually kind of Facebook stalked you, and I saw all the people that follow you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So it's just really cool to see that you have such a big following and that you have such a big influence in such a positive way. That's really cool. So I just want to start off with a really basic question. So why the violin of all instruments? Would you pick that instrument?
Well, I really fell in love with the stringed instruments during 4th grade. An orchestra came to our school, and I just remember being like, I definitely want to play something next year. And then the violin was chosen because there were, the teacher was open-minded enough to kind of help me figure out how to play. So we just kind of tried everything. In the cello, even though that's the one I wanted to do originally, it was just too big, and I couldn't get the bow down at the right spot. And so, and then the violin was too big to put it on my shoulder, but we were like, well, maybe you could do it a little differently where you play the violin up and down. And yeah, so that's basically why. But then I ended up doing, played all the violin parts in orchestra, and then I got into fiddle music and songwriting, and it's just kind of morphed along with me. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I gotta ask, I was curious watching you play, was it harder to play upright as opposed to, you know, somebody?
I don't think so, actually, because like if you think about it, violin is hard no matter what. Like everybody sounds really bad for the first 2 years that they play, and so that's, you know, and then it's the only way I've ever done it. So it's kind of like I think I got really lucky to have a teacher that was open-minded enough to like adapt her training to me. And if I hadn't had that, maybe it would have been harder. But she was, you know, she's familiar because she teaches orchestra. She knew a little bit about all the instruments, and so she could kind of take what she knew about the cello or the bass. I hold my bow like a bass player does, actually, not like a cello player. So we kind of just combined all these things. And so, yeah, having the right teacher, or like a teacher that's willing to be flexible and try something new, that's really the thing that would have made it hard. But because I had that, and I got really lucky for that reason, I don't think it was harder per se.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's really cool to meet flexible people like that too, because I've come across some people who literally don't know how to handle a variety of situations, whereas, you know, coming across people who are flexible in that way are very, I wouldn't say rare, but they're just special.
Yeah, they are. And she, I guess, like, what's been cool about, since winning the Tiny Disc contest, I've met other teachers, and they're like, oh, you know, I never thought about that. So that's cool, because hopefully that'll spread to other teachers. It doesn't just have to be me. And actually, I've met a couple people with similar disabilities to me that already did play that way. It's just that they hadn't been like being used or whatever. But so it's not like, you know, it's not so uncommon. It's just that we don't hear about it a lot. I think maybe.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping through, you know, this interview we can spread the word more. Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing I wanted to kind of ask you about too is what inspired the music you've written already? Yeah,
well, I didn't start writing songs until 2011, so it was actually a long time after I started playing. And I think the very beginning of songwriting came because I started playing in a band with a person named Alan Sparhawk, and he does a way different style of music than me. It's called slowcore. It's like just real slowed down, like kind of darker, heavier music. But we started doing our own project, and he would loop my violin with a looping pedal, which is like a little recording device that does it live. And he gave me a looping pedal and said, I really think you should learn how to do this. And getting to play, like what it does is, so I'll press a button with my leg and then hold it down while I'm playing, and then when I let go of the button, it plays it back again and again.
Yeah, I think I saw that in your Tiny Desk.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I performed. You know, with him, he would do the looping and I would just play harmonies, but then when I got my own looping pedal, a lot of things kind of opened up, like just the idea of building your own songs, and I think that just being exposed to this different form of creative energy, like this that sparked the original songwriting.
That's awesome.
And then a lot of times I write about things I've thought about a lot, or people that I care about, or like, I don't know, but it always feels kind of random, because the very first inkling of a song it always feels pretty spontaneous.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're like, oh, where did that line come from? And then you can kind of flesh it out. But I think the looping pedal really changed a lot in my brain, like in terms of how I thought about music.
Gave you more,
you
know, possibilities.
Yeah, and just kind of opened my mind to what was out there. So I'm pretty sure that's why I started writing songs, and then just had them like able to continue doing that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I totally dig that. That's awesome. I write poetry when I'm not doing anything else, and so I've always wanted to do that, but you know, getting there has been kind of a slow process.
Like write a poetry book, or do like poetry and music?
Poetry and music.
Ooh, that's cool. I have one track like that on my second album, and it's kind of like, it's vulnerable feeling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's cool. Like, I'm glad that I tried it. And there's so many like synthesizers now and looping. You can loop your voice. You can loop any instrument basically that you can plug into an amplifier.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should totally do it someday.
Awesome. I definitely will.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So what is it that drives you to be such an inspiration as you are today? You know, I see you as such an inspiration. Like, what is it that like really got you here?
I think how I like to look at it, because I have a funny relationship with the word inspiration. Maybe not so much from you, you know, because you know what I'm talking about, probably, right? But on the other hand, I think what does drive me right now is the idea that if we get people with disabilities into the mainstream culture, it'll change people's ideas faster.
Yeah.
It's so hard when you're behind the scenes and like people don't even think of you, even when we're talking about big things like healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Like healthcare obviously affects people with disabilities.
Absolutely.
But then we have all these public debates and articles and blah blah blah, and everybody's tweeting about it, and nobody's mentioning people with disabilities.
Right.
And I think a big reason we're like left out of the discussion is just because nobody sees us.
Right.
Right.
We're in the corner.
In the corner, way in the corner, and they think it's like us versus them.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you could get a disability at any moment.
Exactly.
And probably someone you know will if you don't.
Exactly.
Like, if you get old enough, you'll definitely have to deal with this stuff. And so,
For sure.
so I guess what drives me right now to like, I want to inspire other people to realize that they have like a hand in disability justice and disability rights.
Yeah.
And I love music, and so what makes me want to do that is just that it's really fun.
Right.
Like, tutoring is really hard, but it's also really rewarding, and so and it's just like a creative. I mean, everybody has to work. It's a pretty fun way to work.
Absolutely.
You have to do that.
Absolutely.
But then the disability rights piece of it would be just so cool to, and it hasn't happened yet. Like, I feel like we'll get there to a tipping point where you see yourself represented in the media more often.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
pretty rare. When it happens, it's really cool. Like, did you ever see the show Speechless?
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it. I was just like, I don't know how did you like it?
I loved it.
Okay, cool. I mean, and everybody's got their own opinions on that stuff, but I thought it was really neat to see someone with an actual disability play someone with a disability, and it wasn't like a tragedy or
Absolutely. It wasn't,
like
acted up.
He had to commit suicide or something.
Right.
Like, that dialogue gets kind of old, and so.
And it's the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, and so I just want to see that change, and so that's kind of what inspires me to like really go the extra mile, hopefully, to like speed up the process. And I'm not the only one doing it. Like, you're obviously out there. Yeah. There's a lot of people working on it, so the more of us collectively that get in there can kind of make headway.
Absolutely.
I'd like it to be easier for people younger than me to do what we're doing because of accessibility and stuff.
Yeah, and we're also kind of the front runners of all that.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of cool. We're cutting the path so that
hopefully it's not so much resistance in the future. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
For sure, I absolutely agree. So I saw your TED Talk, actually I saw your TED Talk earlier today about sexuality and disability.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool because one of the advocacy groups that I facilitate is Prideability, which is people with disabilities who are also LGBTQIA.
Oh.
So it's cool to kind of, have that commonality.
Yeah.
How do you think people with both disabled and not can change the ideas of beauty and sexuality?
Yeah, that's cool that you saw that talk. So I think kind of like the like distilling it down, how we can all change it is just realizing that like standards are usually just kind of like set by corporations,
right,
to like make them money. And
Absolutely.
So if you're like, oh, if I just lost 10 pounds, oh, if I just buy this cooler car, or oh, if I don't know, like anything, like if I just do this, then I'll be beautiful and somebody will love me. And it's all based, it really is all based on capitalism, because there's beautiful people who are jerks and they're gonna end up not being happy anyways. And then there's people that don't fit the mold of beautiful in our current discussion, but are beautiful anyways. And I think everybody is in their own way. So like, just the idea that just remembering the point of those standards is not actually to like define beauty, it's to make people money. Right. And so just realizing that it's kind of all a scam, right?
The capitalist scam.
Yeah, it kind of is. And so when you realize that, then you can just kind of be yourself and like encourage other people to just be themselves and like, and I think growing up with a disability that was really visible kind of like kept me out of, I felt like none of that stuff applied to me.
I can relate.
Yeah, like what are you gonna, like, so you can get the nicest clothes but you're still gonna look different, right? And so then you're like, well, I don't really,
I'm still out of the running.
like I'm so out of the running, why you focus on it? Right. But then you realize like, hey, that's kind of like a bonus if I don't have to think about that. I can just spend time on other things. So,
absolutely.
And it's not like I never get insecure. I think everybody probably does, right? Yeah. But just keep reminding yourself that those standards are just artificial, like
they don't really mean much.
Yeah, no, they really don't. And then just being more authentic, I think, is what ends up being attractive to people beyond anything else.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that I constantly am fighting for too. Telling people just be authentic, be real, be genuine. Yeah. And that's what people will love you for. But people don't see that, they say, oh, but they have this and they have that. Well, that doesn't matter.
No, ultimately it doesn't. And I think, authenticity is probably like one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself and the world is being authentic. And then the rest of it is just, it works out, and trying to be like compassionate. I think they have to go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can be authentic and still
if you don't
be a total jerk.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to love yourself, and you have to love yourself through others too.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah.
What was it like to win the Tiny Desk Award?
It was pretty surreal. I remember getting the phone call. I was in between teaching fiddle lessons, and it just felt like, what is going on? And then also the idea that I knew a lot was going to change, but I didn't really know how. Yeah. I just knew that like if that just was altering the path of my life a lot, and it really has. So I guess it was just weird to know that a lot of different things were coming, and kind of like any big change, but it was a really positive one. But it definitely was like there's a lot of unknowns, and I couldn't even really tell anyone for the first week because they hadn't announced it yet. And so I remember walking around that week just being like, wow, like this is the last week of your life being this way. Oh, wow. And pretty soon it's going to change. And, some of the changes took longer. Like we ended up starting to tour in October. I went in March and touring, and we sold our house at the end of September and started touring in October. And we're still learning. There's so much to learn, and it wasn't something that you're prepared for, really. Interesting. And so it's been a steep learning curve, but luckily my husband's been willing to do it with me, and so it's cool. But it's definitely definitely a surreal experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume you enjoy it.
Oh yes, totally. It's funny because we're in the middle of like a 20 show tour. I think we had like 20 shows in 24 days or something.
Oh my gosh.
So we're like
That's crazy.
approaching tiredness level.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like every show we've met really cool people. Like you have to keep your perspective of like gratitude because we meet a lot of really cool people on the road and we're learning all the time.
Yeah.
I think what's funny is just like nobody writes you a manual really. So you trial and error and but overall it's been a really positive experience.
That's awesome.
I definitely am glad that we're doing it. Like I look back, I would have a lot of regrets I think if we didn't try what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And the path is still like opening up. Like it's who knows where it'll end up. You know what I mean?
That's so cool. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it is cool. It's been fun.
So what is the most rewarding and the most scariest things about being an artist and being an inspiration? Again, I'm sorry for using that.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to like call you out on that.
No, it's okay.
No, I think the rewarding parts are like meeting people who identify with the songs and it's like either helps them or like a little kid goes to your show and then they decide they want to play the violin or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Meeting other people with disabilities has been really cool just because like I have a song that I'm going to do tonight called I Wait, and it's about the disability rights movement, and it's on my new album, and it's been really fun to play it for people who like really like see themselves in that song, and just like being able to be like a voice that like reflects a culture that hasn't been reflected very much. It's really fun.
Awesome.
And then the scariest stuff is just kind of you don't really know the future, and like you're self-employed all of a sudden, and things are up and down, and just kind of gotta like trust that that if you work hard and take it seriously, that it'll work out eventually, and without putting it's not all about money, obviously. So like, just the scary part is how do you find that balance of like doing what you think you should do without like being foolish or like again, there's no manual book, so you're kind of like winging it. Although I have a business coach, and it's been really cool to like try to like to realize that if you're going to do music as a career, it's like your own little business kind of, and like getting better at that has been a fun challenge for me.
That's awesome.
Kind of figure out what to do and what works.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really neat, especially for people like me, because I'm also an entrepreneur of sorts. I have my own business and all that, which I'll talk to you about later.
Yeah.
But, so it's really cool to hear that come from you, having that fear, but still like pushing forward is really, really neat for me.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I learned about a year after I started teaching is that people with disabilities are twice as likely to be self-employed. And I know for me, I had a lot of trouble finding a job that was like really accommodating and paid more than like $8 an hour. And so I eventually just started teaching fiddle. That's what I was doing for 3 years. And so I was self-employed already, but it was a much more manageable, like easy to predict. You have this many students, this is what you learn, and like that kind of thing. But when I started realizing how many people with disabilities are entrepreneurs, it's like pretty cool. And that's another thing we don't talk a lot about, is like it's like literally double the general population as being entrepreneurs, and I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. We're our own star in our own way. It's really
and like inventing your own path.
Absolutely. What is or was the biggest obstacle getting to where you are today?
Well, I think accessibility continues to be a challenge that it gets kind of old, I guess. Like a lot of venues don't have ramps to the stage or even like an accessible bathroom, and so it really limits where you can play. So I'm doing my own booking right now, and maybe eventually I'll go back to an agency, but I was at an agency that kept booking me not all the time, but enough times where it was problematic at places where if somebody had a disability, they wouldn't be able to get in, and that's really frustrating to me. But it is hard. It's not like, you can say to a venue, are you accessible, and they at first say yes, and then they say, well, they look into renting a ramp, and they decide it's too expensive, and they back out, or like, all these things. And so just trying to navigate that is like another layer. And so that's probably the biggest obstacle, because it does limit to some extent where you can perform, but I would rather do that than play somewhere that somebody can't get to.
For sure.
I mean, obviously, and it sends a message to the other venues like, well, sorry, until you're accessible.
For sure.
I'm not gonna play there. But one thing that would be cool to me is to see more musicians be allies on that front. Like, there's a lot of venues where literally I'll never play, but people play there all the time, and nobody's demanding change. I mean, I can only do so much, right? So I can say I don't want to, but I don't have 25 hours a day extra to like launch campaigns to like make all these places accessible. So I think other artists, it would be cool to see them step up and set similar standards for themselves. I don't want to just be like, oh, that one disabled artist, she's really picky. Like, I want it to be like, oh, accessibility matters.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
to like changing the dialogue to not make it about me not playing there, and more about like the venue needs to get up to code or whatever. So so that's probably the biggest obstacle, I would say.
That's awesome.
I mean, that definitely is.
It's a good obstacle because it's something that honestly I would never thought of as somebody who's not in the music business. I would have never thought of that. So that's really cool. Yeah,
and that's the part of it, is that whole like being like starting that dialogue.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay. This one I just kind of came up. This question I kind of just came off the top of my head because it seemed the most interesting. Because I saw the pictures you had posted on your website and on your TED Talk. What is the most interesting place you've been and why?
We've been to so many places. It's really hard to choose. We did 42 states, I think, so far, maybe 43 now, and then like 7 countries. Iceland was really interesting because when we were there, it never got all the way dark. It was June, but it's also interesting because it's very progressive, but it's very inaccessible. Like, they forgot to include people with disabilities in their human rights campaigns.
Oh, wow.
And so that's like a thing they're kind of starting to finally work on, but it was interesting to be there and just realize like everybody has an idea, which, I mean, you know, in many ways they are. They're really LGBTQIA.
There you go, you got it.
Okay. They're very friendly that way, and they have a lot of women's rights, but then for some reason disability rights are just missing. And so that was interesting. And then I love playing in the UK. It's just like fun to explore other places. And then in terms of like the US, I mean, California is cool because it's California.
Yeah.
And then I had never seen those big cacti.
Oh, yeah.
Saguaro cactus, I think. And like ever in real life, and so I just like every time I go to Arizona, I'm like, this is so cool. So awesome. I don't know. And then the shows we've played, there's so many fun ones. It's hard to narrow it down, but I did get to play at the Decemberist Festival this summer which is one of my favorite bands, and a bunch of the band members, not the lead singer, but the guitarist and the keyboardist and the bassist sat in with me on my set, so awesome. It was a very fun day. But there's so many fun shows, it's kind of hard to to sum it up in one.
So cool, though.
Yeah, but traveling is a highlight because when else we would never have seen most of these places.
No, I'm definitely jealous of you. I'd love to travel one day. So
well, find a way to get paid for it. So
exactly. There you go.
It's I mean, it's not like a vacation at all because you're working.
Yes.
But it's still like, but I wouldn't have seen it if we hadn't had a reason to go there. We weren't the people that we didn't have we weren't just flying all over for the heck of it before that. So pretty fun.
That's awesome. What do you think people with disabilities should focus on in order to better community and society?
Oh, to better, okay. Well, I think working for social justice for all groups is really important. So I think one thing we do is sort of we focus on our own issues, which is important, and we should, and we're really far behind, so definitely disability rights needs to be on the forefront, but then remembering to be an ally for other people. You know, if there's a bill in your area getting discussed that's going to really hurt another minority population, just be there and stand up and,
absolutely.
You know, equal rights for everybody is important, you know?
You know, minorities are minorities, we should all come together.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's I guess that would be, it doesn't mean that you're neglecting your own cause, but just remember that everybody's...
Absolutely. And we're stronger when we help each other.
We definitely are, yeah. I guess that would be my advice.
That's awesome. What are your goals for the future? What's next?
I would love to write a book someday about our travels and in the context, especially of accessibility in the arts, like kind of from that lens.
I was going to say that if you weren't going to, I was like, you should write a book.
But we're just not home a lot right now, so the goal is just kind of like figuring out. I want to keep touring and I love traveling, so I do want to do that, but finding a balance where we could be home a little more to work on stuff like that, and then be out on the road, like still a bunch, during the year. And then I just released an album on the 7th of September called Learning How to Stay, and that was a huge project. It took over a year to make, and it was a full band, so it's a lot different than anything else I've recorded. And so now that that's done, I'm not quite ready to think about the next album yet, because it was like a massive undertaking. But I want to eventually like keep writing the songs and stuff. But the book would be fun. I think I love writing like words, and that's one thing I like about music is the lyrics, right? But poetry too, and just thinking of a way to put that down where other people could understand disability rights from a less like medical or technical perspective, or like us helping them, but like more just like this isn't a human experience, and like here's why it can matter, so that's sort of what I'd like to write about.
Awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure. I've had a great time interviewing you. You're so awesome.
Thanks, Alex. I'm so glad I got to meet you. And thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time to set this up.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
Cool. Well, sayonara. See you guys later. Thanks. I don't know.